Good evening, and thank you all for being here. I'm here amidst people, obviously, with historical knowledge and diplomatic knowledge that makes probably surprising to some of you that I'm even here. I'm here as a retired businessman, but more importantly, and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the other fact, we're very concerned, as I'm sure many of you are, about the threats this nation and this world faces right now, which, as I think we've already been hearing, are the greatest I feel we faced in my adult life. Those threats have very related to terrorism, failed states, civil wars that are out of control, and nuclear proliferation, and a state of discussion between the countries most important that's abysmal and erratic, even though I suspect under the surface in the military area and some of what Kerry's doing better than we might imagine. I come here absolutely convinced that these threats will not be resolved if there is not extended collaboration, respectful collaboration between the Federation of Russia and the United States, bringing along with it the many other countries that look to those two countries for leadership. A word on the business front, if I might. I spent about a quarter of a century, starting in 1990 in one way or another, in Russia from a business standpoint with Procter Gamble, and 7 years with the Walt Disney Company with its involvement in Russia. We went there, our first trip was February of 1990. We were visiting 5 capitals of then Eastern and Central Europe within a week. We'd taken plenty of advice on where we should go. We were told go quickly to Czechoslovakia. We should go quickly to Hungary. Get into Eastern Germany when it unites with West Germany. Go slow in Poland and don't even bother to go to Moscow. Well, we went to Moscow, and we decided in that visit, despite some crazy meetings, that we would create a business, and we did so in partnership, the only time we ever did as a company, with the University of St. Petersburg, with which I became very closely allied. Well, we, thanks to Russian and some non-Russian employees, built a great business, became the 5th largest in the total Procter & Gamble world. Those metrics change when the ruble goes from 35 to 80. But it's an extraordinarily successful business with 3,000 or 4,000 employees. The Walt Disney business, while younger, remains the same. Very successful. We've had no difficulty combating corruption in this business. While every country presents its own challenges, doing business in Russia for us has been very manageable. We face another big financial crisis, as we all know. 98 is now being redone. And in some ways it's tougher for the Russian people because many had become used to living at a middle income level. And nobody expected this. But I think the reaction of the Russian government has been absolutely consistent in reinforcing the importance of international investment. And while FDI is down 2/3 this past year, while the markets that we're in are down 10 to 15%, while inflation is in double digits, and it's very tough and will continue to be tough for the Russian people. Companies like ours, and they represent the great mass of companies, are staying in Russia for the same reason we came. Because of the population base, because of the education of that population base, because of its importance. In every respect, a country can be important. We believe that being there has been helpful. We're told it has been. And it certainly allowed us, like myself, who blessed from getting to know Russian people, that the desires of Russian men and women are exactly the same as American men and women. They want peace. They want safety for their families. They want an economic lifestyle that allows them to grow. Perhaps the biggest risk right now, I think, for Russia, it will be an intellectual human capital exit, as has happened in places like Portugal. I'm not too pessimistic on that, given the belief in Russia, but it is a risk. But we'll carry on. There are some companies investing more. None of the big ones are leaving, and they won't. I think the control of the capital markets, allowing the currencies to go as it has shown great discipline, not evident in many, many other countries that I've been part of that have gone through the economic challenges. On the geopolitical front, I really defer to the folks that are here. I would say simply two things. One, it's crystal clear that we face humongous challenges today in terrorism, these failed states. You know, Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, and putting Syria back together again, and Ukraine back together again. And what we're going to do in Libya is a gargantuan challenge. And anybody who thinks that's going to get done without Russia and the United States and Russia bringing Iran along in Syria is out of their mind. And when I hear stuff, as I heard on the Republican debate, where we ought to attack both Assad and ISIS at the same time, I shake my head and hope that individual learns something or doesn't become the President of the United States. It just makes no sense. We have to be able to pull this together. I just make another quick comments on what I've observed. We've all seen this in our life, the danger of self-fulfilling prophecies built, as Ambassador Matlock said, on false narratives. There's a real danger in self-fulfilling prophecies if they aren't corrected. And we got a lot of bad prophecies going on right now that we cannot allow to be self-fulfilled. Putting ourselves in other people's shoes. We have a hard time doing that as human beings, personally, even in our own families sometimes. We're doing a really bad job of putting ourselves in other nations' shoes when it comes to Russia and the United States. And Putin is involved in the same thing. I mean, lots has happened that could get him really enraged, just as Gorbachev was enraged when we did the SDI. He said, "What do you think we are, idiots?" at one point. But you know, that can be turned into paranoia. And on the other side, there are those that are seeing Russia, Putin is having his look on reestablishing Soviet influence, go into the Baltics, take over Ukraine. You know, he says that would be crazy, and he's right, it would be crazy. And he means it would be crazy, and he won't do it. And people who start to believe that he'd do it are failing to do one thing that any business person has to assess about a competitor, and that is, what is their real strategic intent based on their own interests? What is their real strategic intent based on their real interests? And in my view, the strategic intent of Putin, the Russian Federation, is to have an economically thriving country, carrying its role in the world that it ought to have, with very good relationships with adjacent countries like Ukraine, just as we would insist on with Mexico and Canada. That's all I'll say.